What happened to Sweet?
The Sweet originated from the British soul band Wainwright's Gentlemen, formed around 1962. Initially known as Unit 4, the founding members included Chris Wright, Jan Frewer, Jim Cyril, and Alfred Fripp. In 1964, they came fifth in a national beat group contest. Ian Gillan replaced Wright, and Ann Culley joined as a vocalist. Mick Tucker later on replaced Phil Kenton on drums. They recorded tracks like Ain't That Just Like Me before Gillan left to join Episode 6 and later Deep Purple. Brian Connolly replaced Ian, and various lineup changes followed until the band eventually broke up in January 1968. Originally, the Sweet was called the Sweet Shop and consisted of Brian Connolly on vocals, Mick Tucker on vocals and drums, Frank Torpey on guitar, and Steve Priest on bass. Priest had previously played with the mid-60s band The Countdowns, which had been produced and recorded by Joe Meek. They were managed by Paul Nicholas, who later went on to star in Hair. This eventually led to a contract with Fontana Records. The Sweet initially attempted to combine diverse musical influences, including the Monkees and 1960s bubblegum pop groups such as the Archies, with more heavy rock-oriented groups such as The Who. The Sweet adopted the rich vocal harmony style of the Hollies with distorted guitars and a heavy rhythm section. The Sweet's initial album appearance was on the budget label Music for Pleasure as part of a compilation called Gimme Dat Ding, which was released in December 1970. Sweet had one side of the record, and the Pipkins, whose soul hit Gimme Dat Ding gave the LP its name, had the other side. In 1970, the group truncated their name to Sweet and signed a recording contract with Fontana/EMI, releasing 4 unsuccessful singles. Following their failure, Torpey left the group and was replaced by Andy Scott. The new lineup of Sweet signed to RCA Records in 1971, where they were placed under the direction of songwriters Nicky Chinn and Mike Chapman. Chinn and Chapman wrote several light bubblegum pop songs for the group, the first of which, Funny Funny, reached number 13 on the UK charts. The Sweet's first full LP album, Funny How Sweet Cocoa Can Be, was released in November of 1971. The duo wrote 5 more top 40 hits for the group, including Little Willie and Wigwam Bam, which were all lightweight bubblegum pop numbers loaded with double entendres. During this time, Sweet was writing their own B-sides and album tracks. All of the group's compositions were harder than Chinn and Chapman songs, featuring crunching hard rock guitars. Consequently, the duo decided to write tougher songs for the group, starting with Blockbuster, which was the first result of Chinn and Chapman's neo-glam rock approach, and it was the biggest hit Sweet ever had in the UK up until that point, which reached number 1 on the charts in early 1973 and eventually going platinum. For the next 2 years, Sweet continued to chart with Chinn and Chapman compositions, including the top 10 hits Hellraiser, Ballroom Blitz, Teenage Rampage, and The 16s. After Hellraiser was released in May and reached number 2 in the UK, the band's US label Bell released the group's first American album, The Sweet, in July 1973. To promote their singles, The Sweet made numerous appearances on UK and European TV shows such as Top of the Pops and Supersonic. The band also capitalized on the glam rock explosion, rivaling Gary Glitter, T-Rex, Queen, Slade, and Wizard for outrageous stage clothing. By the summer of 1974, the members of Sweet had grown tired of the control Chinn and Chapman exerted over their careers and decided to record without the duo. The resulting album, Sweet Fanny Adams, reached number 27 in the UK, but it yielded no hits. In the spring of 1975, Sweet had their first self-penned hit with Fox on the Run, which reached the top 10 in both the US and the UK. Fox on the Run appeared on the collection Desolation Boulevard in America, and its release helped Ballroom Blitz reach the top 10 in the summer of 1975. The following single release, a hard rock track called Action in July 1975, peaked at number 15 in the UK. Strung Up, released in the fall of 1975, continued the group's move toward album-oriented rock. For the rest of the decade, they continued to churn out albums, each of which was less successful than its predecessor. Sweet spent the latter half of 1975 in Musicland Studios in Munich, Germany, where they recorded the Give Us a Wink album with German sound engineer Reinhold Mack, who later recorded with Electric Light Orchestra and co-produced Queen. With Give Us a Wink being held over, RCA issued a double album in Europe, Strung Up, in November. A new album, Off the Record, was released in April 1977. Sweet bounced back into the charts in 1978 with Love Is Like Oxygen, but the single proved to be their last gasp, and they never reached the top 10 again either in the US or the UK. The first Polydor album, Level Headed, was released in January 1978, and this album found Sweet experimenting by combining rock and classical sounds. Connolly left the band after Love Is Like Oxygen, and the group replaced him with keyboardist Gary Moberly. In late October, having spent further time at Clearwell Castle to write for their next album, Sweet arrived at the Townhouse Studio in Shepherd's Bush, London, to complete and record Cut Above the Rest, which was released in April 1979. One more studio album, Identity Crisis, was recorded in London during 1980 and 81, but was only released in West Germany and Mexico. And after several years of little to no success or attention, Sweet broke up in 1982. In the decade following their breakup, Sweet reunited on various occasions. In 1985, a dance club medley of their hits called It's the Sweet Mix became a British top 50 success, and following the single's popularity, the group reformed for a tour that proved to be less anticipated than expected. Later in the decade, Scott toured as part of the group Paddy Goes to Holyhead. In 1989, Scott and Tucker reformed Sweet to record a live album at London's Marquee Club, and they planned to go on tour, but Tucker fell ill and had to leave the group. This version of Sweet included Paul Mario Day on lead vocals, Phil Lanzon on keyboards, and Mal McNulty on bass. Sweet carried on with Scott as the sole remaining original member, and in 1991 released the album A. Unfortunately, Brian Connolly died at the age of 51 on February 9th, 1997 from liver failure and repeated heart attacks, which was attributed to his abuse of alcohol in the 70s and early 80s. Mick Tucker also died. He died on February 14th, 2002 from leukemia at the age of 54. Scott produced the Suzi Quatro album Back to the Drive, released in February 2006. In January 2008, Steve Priest assembled his version of Sweet in Los Angeles. He enlisted a guitarist, Stuart Smith, and LA native Richie Honori. Smith's bandmate in Heaven and Earth was brought in on drums. Over the years that followed, Scott's Sweet, not to be confused with a competing Sweet fronted by former bassist Steve Priest, played shows with a variety of lead singers and lineups, and in 2011, they released the single Join Together. The next year, Sweet returned with New York Connection, an album of covers with samples and nods to their old catalog thrown in. Paul Manzi joined Sweet on their 2014 Australian tour, replacing Tony O'Hora, who was absent for personal reasons. The band played 2 gigs and various members guested with Australian veteran performers including Brian Cadd and Russell Morris, and different members of AC/DC, The Angels, Rose Tattoo, and Skyhooks. The band continued to tour heavily and in 2017 saw their early career honored with Sensational Sweet Chapter 1 The Wild Bunch, which was a huge box set containing their albums and singles cut between 1971 and 1978. Unfortunately, bassist Steve Priest died on June 4, 2020 at the age of 72. In March 6, 2024, it was announced that the current members of Sweet would headline AmadoCon 2024, a 3-day business and learning summit presented by the Amado Group during the weekend of March 8th through the 10th. And that's what happened to Sweet. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. Give me some facts about Sweet that I failed to mention in this video, and let me know who I should cover next on this channel. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.